Hello guys, Omni here. I wanted to make a video about something that I had brought to my attention earlier today. Um, and this is about Star Wars and some stuff that has come out from Bob Iger's memoirs that released earlier today. And there's some very interesting things, some things that have had some light shed on them that I feel a lot of people got the sense of whenever Disney purchased Lucasfilm from George Lucas, and I don't I don't know how I feel about it. I definitely it's definitely upsetting the things that I've read. Star Wars was a really important thing to me at such a very early age. The original trilogy was something I just fell in love with as a kid. Um, and I've loved Star Wars ever since. I have my problem with the prequels, but Star Wars has always been George Lucas's vision to me. That's how I've always felt about it, and whatever additions he tended to make, whether I liked it, whether I disagreed with it, whatever, it was his creation and his world that we were being invited into. To me, he was free to do whatever he wanted with it, and it was his. It was something that he brought to life for us to enjoy. And, I think it's kind of funny too, at least for me, it's kind of coincidental, at least, that this news came only a day after I watched a documentary about the original trilogy. And, just the passion, the sacrifice, and everything that went into George taking this risk at creating this universe when no studio was willing to back him, and how much blood, sweat, tears, his time, his marriage, and everything that led into what Star Wars became, because he was confident in what his vision was. And whether or not you feel like it got away from him, I know a lot of people for some reason don't like the prequels. I love them. I enjoy them quite a bit. They are not nearly as good as the original trilogy by any means, but I don't think they're bad films. I think they definitely aren't perfect, but I enjoy them. I think they add to the lore. They build the world that was started in the original trilogy, and it's been a coherent story from the very beginning. Again, sure, there's some additions that not a lot of people jived well with, and I know I didn't either, but I still enjoyed them. I enjoyed Lucas's passion. I loved the world he created, and I was really distraught, I think, initially when I heard news that Disney bought Lucasfilm, that he had been given up. And I know that was he's really suffered from the backlash from the majority of fans and the outrage over the prequel trilogy. He's expressed many times that it's just gotten too hard to do what he wants to do without being chastised. He wanted to feel in control of his own creation, and he lost that, and it became too much of a chore, too much of a hassle to stray from that. So he put it in the hands of people that he trusted, and stepping down as CEO of Lucasfilm and passing on the torch to Kathleen Kennedy, who has been running Lucasfilm ever since Disney's acquisition of it. And that's where things kind of fallen apart a little bit. And some things that have come out as a part of this Bob Iger's memoirs shed a little bit of light on that, of some potential dishonesty, or at least maybe their intentions not being clear. And it really, to me, comes across like they kind of tricked George into thinking they were going to honor the direction he wanted things to go in. I'm going to read a little bit from this article that covers some of these topics, and I want to know what you guys think and feel, because honestly, reading this, it really made me sad. It, especially, like I said, after watching that documentary and seeing how much. Now, Disney's a corporation. Disney is about making money. They are churning this out. They spun this in a direction that according to Bob Iger, was completely different from the direction George wanted to go in. And George, whether or not it's a good idea, whether or not we like it, he always did what he thought the story that he wanted to tell needed. To the point he would bet on it. He would finance his films himself with his own money because he believed in his projects. He didn't invest in his own movies to turn another profit. He wanted to create the art he wanted to create. And Disney used to be about that, but it hasn't been that for a long time. I still love Disney. I still love what they put out, but it is a corporate machine, and it has been for a long time. And I think he was just misled a little bit by some of the people in his own inner circle, and as well as the people that he was dealing with at Disney that kind of spun things in this direction. But before we get too deep into anything else here, let's go ahead and I want to pull up the article and read a little bit from it here. Disney CEO's Bob Iger's memoir, The Ride of a Lifetime: Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company, released Monday. Iger reflects on Star Wars creator George Lucas feeling upset and betrayed upon learning Disney intended to go in a different direction and forego using his plots for the sequel trilogy following the company's 2012 acquisition of Lucasfilm. At some point in the process, George told me that he completed outlines for 3 new movies. He agreed to send us 3 copies of the outline, one for me, one for Walt Disney Senior Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary Alan Braverman, and one for co-chair and Chief Creative Officer, Walt Disney Studios, Alan Horn, who'd just been hired to run our studio, Iger recounts. Alan Horn and I read George's outlines, and we decided we needed to buy them, though we made it clear in the purchase agreement that we would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plot lines he laid out. Iger continues, he knew that I was going to stand firm on the question of creative control, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to accept. And so he reluctantly agreed to be available to consult with us at our request. I promised that we would be open to his ideas. This was not a hard promise to make. Of course, we would love to be open. Of course, we would be open to George Lucas's ideas, but like the outlines, we would be under no obligation. Iger then details meeting with Lucas, screenwriter Michael Arndt, and Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy at Skywalker Ranch to talk about their ideas for the film. George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that we weren't using the stories that he submitted during the negotiations. The truth was, Kathy, the Force Awakens writer-director J.J. Abrams, Alan, and I discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. George knew we weren't contractually bound to anything, but he thought that our buying the story treatments was a tacit promise that we would follow them, and he was disappointed that his story was being discarded. I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way, and I didn't think I had now, but I could have handled it better. I should have prepared him for the meeting with JJ and Michael and told him about our conversations, that we felt it was better to go in another direction. I could have talked through this with him and possibly avoided angering him by not surprising him. Iger then admits. Now, in the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed. And while this whole process would never have been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start. Disney's sequel trilogy ultimately incorporated ideas that resembled Lucas's. Lucas once envisioned a female Jedi Padawan, Kira, eventually materialized as Daisy Ridley's Rey, and an aged and exiled Luke Skywalker, played by a returning Mark Hamill. The story between an in-training Rey and a reluctant teacher, Luke, in Rian Johnson's Star Wars The Last Jedi was inspired in part by Lucas's original concept, with the Jedi killer character and reimagined by Lucas earlier being realized in The Force Awakens as the villain Kylo Ren. Lucas commented on his plans for the sequels in 2018. As Lucas told it, the trilogy was going to get into a microbiotic world, exploring a world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Wills. And the Wills are the ones who actually control the universe. We've seen them in Clone Wars, by the way. The Wills we've seen in Clone Wars. And just as a little side note, the original story, the original script for Star Wars was, it began with a narration that had been cut that was supposedly from the point of view of the Wills, because the Wills in the original script for Star Wars A New Hope were very prominent in what they were going about. And we would have a temple that makes an appearance in Rogue One that further kind of builds upon the whole lore of the Wills, as well as how they've appeared, and they taught Qui-Gon how to become one with the Force in the Clone Wars, which then went on to Yoda learning, to passing that on to Obi-Wan, to passing it on to Luke, to Anakin, and so forth, so on and so forth. They were an integral part. So apparently, that is also where the line a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away is, because the Wills being these eternal beings that live through the Force and feed off of the Force, they were telling the story of the Skywalkers in a past tense. So that would have been an interesting concept, and we were finally going to get some information and some details on what they were and what the Force is, some more greater concepts of what we've ever seen the Force explored in ways that we never had before. Anyway, going back to the writing, and the Wills are the ones who can actually control the universe. They feed off the Force. If I'd held on to the company, I could have done it, and then it would have been done. Of course, a lot of the fans would have hated it, just like they did with Episode 1, Phantom Menace, and everything, but at least the whole story from beginning to end would be told. I think there was a little bit down here too. Yeah, that's about... So before we go into that, I wanted to talk about what we just covered. So Lucas had this out, and it's clear in Iger's statements that even before they kind of closed on the meetings, before they closed on him buying the scripts, it sounds like to me that there were already conversations going on behind Lucas's back between Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Alan Horn, and Bob Iger. That may not be the case. That's just how I'm reading into it, but it does feel like there was some of the reins were just kind of being stolen from Lucas, and he thought that them buying his scripts were a way of good faith of them wanting to adhere to his vision. In which case, we got some elements of it, so that still kind of creep in, but the vast majority of it has been kind of tweaked and reiterated into a different direction that I really want to know the details of his scripts, what he actually outlined, but I feel like Disney bought them so that they wouldn't go public. It's more likely that they bought them from him to hide them away so that it wouldn't be out there, so they could be free to do what they wanted to do with it. We'll continue on, and this is going on to talk about his initial reactions to the sequel trilogy and how he, after the fact, after he realized that this was going a different direction, after having seen and worked on some of the stuff, or well, not really worked on, but saw the execution of some of these things, one of which is being he didn't hide his disappointment over The Force Awakens. According to Lucas, there was nothing new about the film that caught his eye or interest. In each of the films in the original trilogy, it was important to him to present new worlds, new stories, new characters, new technologies. In this one, he said, there weren't enough visual steps or technical leaps forward. He wasn't wrong, and it wasn't appreciating the pressure. He also wasn't appreciating the pressure we were under to give ardent fans a film that felt quintessentially Star Wars, Iger explained. Really, appreciating the pressure of the ardent fans. Wow, it sounds like that hasn't happened to Lucas before. It sounds like, wow, what? He didn't deal with that with the prequels? Are you telling me that this is something baffling to him? That this is not something he's experienced? The whole debacle of him doing what he wanted, taking the leaps in technology, evolving technology as he went along, taking different story leaps of his own that he felt was right for his story. Whether or not we liked it or not, he still did it. You think he doesn't know what that pressure's like to build and follow up on it? Have you seen anything, any of the behind the scenes for even the original trilogy, him trying to follow up A New Hope with the Empire, trying to follow up Empire with Return of the Jedi? You think he's not aware of this problem? Sorry. This is, anyway, I've tried to be so neutral about the current trilogy. I like The Force Awakens personally. I understand the stance that they had on making it seem familiar and seem Star Wars, and it really did to me. I even much to the point where I was just kind of like, this is kind of like the entire original trilogy smashed into a single movie, namely Empire and A New Hope, just kind of abridged into a single film. But I get it. It's been a while. People had a sour taste after the prequel, so let's make a movie that pays homage to A New Hope, to the original trilogy. I understand that. But then it just kind of veers off, and I don't know. I don't know where it's going, and it's so clear that they didn't either, because they didn't have an outline. They have said on multiple occasions, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, and all of them said that there was not an outline. They didn't have a trilogy planned. Their plan was to have a baton. J.J. Abrams was lucky enough to start it. He started a lot of interesting mysteries, and he laid out what some of those answers to those mysteries would or could be, but they were ignored because there was no one directing the storyline. Right now, everything with Rise of the Skywalker that they've been doing or talking about or saying is clear-cut course correction. It is them trying to save face. It's them trying to win back the fans they lost from The Last Jedi. Whether or not you enjoyed it or not, it definitely feels like they're just kind of turning their back on The Last Jedi and some of the things in there, despite what J.J. Abrams have said. I think they've just kind of reworked some of the things that came up in the film to make it work going forward. But that aside, they didn't have a plan. They were just passing off the script, the outline to the next person, and then they would build off of that. And then they would build off of that and go on. There was no beginning and middle and end for this trilogy in mind from the beginning. When Lucas at least wrote the original trilogy, he had to shorten the film down to A New Hope because he just couldn't keep filming all of his script. That script later became Empire Strikes Back, which then branched off into Return of the Jedi. It didn't just manifest out of nowhere. There was tweaks and adjustments that were made to be sure to accommodate the actors leaving, Harrison Ford possibly not coming back for Return of the Jedi. There was things in consideration, but there was an outline from the very beginning. With the prequels, there was an outline to the very beginning, especially since we knew where it was going to end up thanks to the original trilogy. That's the glory of prequels. We know where it's going to eventually go. But with this sequel trilogy, which is going off and going into unknown territories that none of us have ever seen before, except for in the books and the expanded universe and the comics and the games and all of the stuff we've had before, that there's so many expectations that have been built for the last 20, 30, 40 years. I don't even know at this point. Not right now, not off the top of my head. It's just, there's been decades of people building expectations of what the future of after the Return of Jedi is for Luke. That this whole like turn and twists and turn, at least in Lucas's outline, he was still a Jedi. He may have been reluctant to train her, but he still did it. But I don't know. I don't know. There's so much that doesn't set right with the way they're doing it. It just seems so eclectic. It seemed out of control that they just didn't have a plan. They were trying to do so much at one time, having spin-off movie after spin-off movie after spin-off movie. We're supposed to have one Star Wars movie every year for the next infinity since they now purchased it. And after Solo, they just gave up on that. Even though I liked Solo, I liked Rogue One. Were they needed? No, but I enjoyed them. I didn't think they hurt anything, but they were fun to watch. I enjoyed them quite a bit. The Darth Vader scene in Rogue One is one of my favorite Star Wars moments, period. But that aside, we'll go on. George Lucas doesn't know about the pressure of appeasing fans, really. Anyway, we'd intentionally created a world that was visually and tonally connected to the earlier films to not stray too far from what people loved and expected, and George was criticizing us for the very thing we were trying to do. Duh. While Lucas may not have been a fan of the film to start, Iger, who is wholly supportive of The Force Awakens, the CEO says J.J. Abrams did the near impossible by bridging the previous Star Wars trilogies with what was to come for the franchise. Nowadays, Disney puts a focus on Star Wars outside of blah, 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 blah. With all their various content they're pushing out onto Disney+, The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan Kenobi show, the upcoming revival of the Clone Wars series, which George Lucas was involved in, and J.J. Abrams, with Rise of Skywalker coming out in December, it's so clear too that they needed to figure out how to get things back on track after The Last Jedi. There's some great things about that movie. I'm not going to lie. There's some things about that movie I really like. There's some things about that movie that just I cannot get past because they bug me so much. And I'm not the only one. If you like it, sure, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with liking it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with liking the sequel trilogy, just like there's nothing wrong liking the prequel trilogy. It's so far removed from everything that's been built up to this point in a lot of ways. I like Daisy Ridley. I love the character of Rey. Aside from the fact I do think she needs to actually train and work for something or have a loss to build character. Luke lost a lot. He took out the Death Star, but guess what? Empire Strikes Back happened and he got whooped because he wasn't strong enough. He wasn't good enough. No matter how inherent or inherited his ability to use the Force was, it didn't matter because he wasn't trained enough. We haven't seen that yet because between Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, there was only a couple of days. Whereas between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, there was, 2, 3, 4 years between there? I can't remember exact, but there was multiple years between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Plenty of time for Luke to learn, adapt with the Force, since he's already kind of done that. It makes sense. And they're doing that now. With Last Jedi, we've got, I don't know if they've confirmed how far away we are from Last Jedi. I can't remember if it's a year or two, but there's been a huge gap of time that has passed in the universe from Last Jedi to this. And we see even in the trailer that Rey is training. She is developing her Force power. She's getting control, which was absent. Luke was supposed to have trained her, but that only took place over 2 days? 2-3 days she was on that island. It wasn't long because there was a countdown timer for throughout the entire movie from the beginning to end because we were waiting on their fuel to run out. She didn't have long enough to really develop it. And he taught her 3 lessons and we only saw 2 of them unless you have the Blu-ray or DVD in which you watch the extras and see the 3rd lesson. It's just not enough of a growth, but I like the character. I like what they were doing. I like the whole team. Finn is awesome. Poe is awesome. BB-8 is awesome. I wish R2-D2 had something to do because he's so important to it. It's just, there's been such a neglect, I feel like, for the original characters. And I feel like it's purely to push merchandising for Disney because, again, it's coming back to that corporate machine. They went right into developing Galaxy's Edge and just to milk it even more, and that's failing. They're losing money on that right now. People aren't showing up like they had thought. Things are overpriced, so people have stopped going. The initial wave that went when it initially opened is about it so far. Last reports I've saw, like it's not barren, but it's definitely not arm to arm like it was initially. So I don't know what's going on there. They've cut all their plans for the spinoff films. They're going more contained. I don't know what their plan is, and it's clear because they didn't have a plan. And I'm hopefully optimistic for Rise of the Skywalker Rise of Skywalker, because in the wake of The Last Jedi, guess what? They called back JJ, who managed to pull off Force Awakens, begged him, because he was already about to take on another project, begged him to be like, come here. We lost our director for episode 9. Can you please, can you come back and do this, please? And he's like, all right, I guess I don't want to, but I will. And what does he do? He calls Lucas. George Lucas has been hands-on involved in Rise of Skywalker. Wow, funny that, right? The guy who created it all, gave you outlines on what to do with this, has an idea on what to do with it? Come on. All right, we can put that away. I'm so upset about this whole situation, and I'm still excited for the movie. George Lucas is hands-on involved. J.J. Abrams, I've enjoyed pretty much anything he's directed. I know some people have an issue with his style, the way his storytelling is, but I like his works. I think he's great. I think he does a really good job definitely at adapting other material. I think he did a great job with Force Awakens, but I don't think it was necessarily all his idea to rehash Force Awakens or A New Hope into that movie again. But that aside, George Lucas is back involved. There's a lot that they're trying to do to connect the entire series together. They've all been about the Skywalker family. This has been the Skywalker Saga. That is another thing that Kathleen Kennedy also lied about, was that this would always be about the Skywalkers, the Skywalker family. But it was so clear from Force Awakens, Last Jedi, that they were trying to not make it about the family. Not. The Force, the ability to use the Force is genetic. There are anomalies that happen. There are Force anomalies, like the Chosen One, like Anakin, but the story from Kathleen Kennedy's mouth, George Lucas's mouth, the story was and will always be about Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. And it comes back, and that began with Palpatine interfering with his birth and involuntarily creating Anakin, the Chosen One, being a core part of that. Palpatine's had his hands and fingers in everything. It's just, it just reeks of them trying to scramble to tie everything together when the last two movies only did. Okay, The Force Awakens didn't do this. The Force Awakens set up and promised more. It promised Skywalkers. It promised Luke. And then Last Jedi subverted our expectations and unraveled the entire plan. Now, does it contradict it? No. J.J. Abrams' own words say that The Last Jedi doesn't contradict anything that they were working on, which just sounds like to me that with him on board and with Lucas on board, that they were able to work with what was done in that film and make it work in a coherent way to get things back on track. I don't know. I don't know at this point. I want it to be good. This is my favorite franchise, my favorite movie series ever. I I still well up and get emotional anytime I hear the opening sting, the opening orchestral music to The Crawl. I just can't. Like, even at The Last Jedi, I cried before the movie started. I saw the logo and I was already tearing up because Star Wars just makes me happy. It's the one thing that brings me back to my childhood and makes me just like forget about all the crappy stuff in the universe that we live in right now that is going on. It's the only thing that like helps me escape. And it's just, a lot of the magic was just kind of like twisted and used by this company. George Lucas, the creator of all of this, of which they wouldn't even have to have all of this, to have bought it if it wasn't for him. And it just seems like they just don't care. That's just what I get out of it. I get that they only saw this for the money, for the name, for the brand, like they do, and let it go. Thank God that the MCU is headed by Kevin Feige, who actually cares and is a fan of what he's working on, the MCU would have turned out just as bad. I mean, you can call it the money-making scheme it is, but he cares. It's clear that he cares about the characters he's working on and that building up what they did. Thank the Lord Marvel Studios has a Kevin Feige head under them, keeping things on track underneath of Disney. I don't know what all going on there between those two companies, but Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilms, Kathleen Kennedy, like, bless her heart, I think has had to deal with so much more pressure than anybody involved. Taking over the reins from Lucas for one, and then having to try to bring Star Wars back in a world that is partially still scorned by the prequels. At least people around my age and up have still been scorned and feeling down about the prequels or hard on the prequels, even though personally, I mean, my friends had no issues with it, but I know a lot of people my age didn't enjoy it, didn't enjoy the prequels all that much, and a lot of people older than me definitely didn't. But it's not about us anymore, but it's about consistency. It's about the world. If you create inconsistency in the worlds, you don't have a world anymore. You got to make sense of it. And it's just, I don't know. I'm just rambling on at this point. We're at a 30-minute video on this, and I'm sorry. This was something that came out earlier today that I've just kind of been lingering on, and I just watched somebody else talk about it before I decided to actually get this off my chest and vent, because I was about to just kind of the fans and what they did to George Lucas, because he was going to make the sequel trilogy. He was going to do it. He was going to write. He had the outlines. He was going to do it himself if they didn't buy Lucasfilm. But he was so beaten down by the criticisms and the people who hated the prequels that he just physically and mentally couldn't put himself through it again. And that just makes me feel so crappy as a Star Wars fan to know that the fandom itself is the reason George Lucas sold it off. You know, it's so funny that we were all like, or not all of us, a loud majority. I'm not going to say, I think the silent majority have just been fine. But the loud majority of people I was like, we need to get control away from Lucas. He's ruining Star Wars. What happens? We got control away from Lucas. Guess what? What's everybody saying now? Oh God, we need to get Lucas back into control of Star Wars. These other people are ruining Star Wars. We need Lucas. Make up your mind, people. This is why he sold it, man. Anyway, I'm sorry. I can't, I'm not gonna go on any longer. I'm gonna pass this off to you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feelings. How does reading this article make you feel? Did you interpret it differently? I don't know. I want to know what you guys think. That I've said my piece. I've thrown out my tinfoil hat theory on this whole thing, but that's my 2 cents. I still love Star Wars as a whole, even the parts I don't enjoy, I accept as Star Wars. The parts of The Last Jedi that I don't like or don't agree with, I accept as Star Wars. I don't have to like it, but it's Star Wars, and Star Wars I will always love. Just like your family. You don't have to like everybody in your family, but you're still kind of obligated to love them in some way, shape, or form, because they're still your family. You can't get rid of your family. So you can't get rid of parts of that. Star Wars is my family. It's been there just as longer than my brother has. So, sorry, brother. Star Wars came first. But that's it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If anybody's still here, sound off in the comments and let me know your thoughts. If you like this video, support the channel. liking, commenting, subscribing. You know the drill. If you didn't like it, like I said, share your thoughts, your comments, your interpretation of this, even if it's completely different than mine. Share your love or distaste for Star Wars, whichever. Give me your thoughts and feelings, everybody. I don't care if you're on my side, you're not. Sound off in the comments and let's talk about it. I'm always open to other points of view because sometimes I can get emotional and I can get invested and I can have a bias, and it helps to kind of have that check. So thank you guys. If you're still here, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody. And may the Force be with you always.